Motor cars were few at that hour upon the Godney road, and from the distant town there came uninterrupted a murmur of drowsy life, of a life that was not the life of man or of beast, but of Glastonbury herself, murmuring softly in her long historic trance of the past, of the present, and of the future. Sam thought to himself, this Christ that is hidden in matter, and contradicts all cruelty, can he possibly come from nature? What I do say concerning this mere commune, Mr. Twig was now observing, is that it be a play-acting of the educated. For as such an understands them things, 'tis no doubt a very good commune. But I bain't a book-learned man. Conservative be a plain word to I, and so be liberal, in a manner of speaking, though not so plain. But I reckon a man must be pretty far along with his book-learning afore he gets the hang of a commune. Well, Mr. Twig, said Sam sententiously, my father's got a lot of books on his study, but I remember quite well that the first number of the Wayfarer came out and there was a long article about communism in it by Mr. Atling. He said very much what you're saying now. Me would depart Jones do say, went on Mr. Twig, that it be thy noises that he hearin in hospital, they rumblings and blearings from they ruings, what have brought such things to pass. But if you ask me, mister, what has called down these wonders to earth, I just say 'tis thick young man from they Scilly Isles. How are your nieces at Miss Drew's? Inquired Sam. The old man leaned forward, his hands on his knees, and his fingers at his lips. Lily did tell I last time they was here that Louis be keepin' company with young Tonkersville, what be Mr. Crow's new pilot. Lily says it be a tender earnestness in dear Louis, seeing Mr. Tankersville be a lone man with a wife in cemetery. Sam was not enough of a psychologist to catch the full flavor of this wife in cemetery in relation to Lily's interest in her sister's good fortune, although there did arise up on the utmost verge of his consciousness like a beautiful apparition at a seance, the pure cold melancholy of the parlour-maid's face. And what about Lily herself? Hasn't she got a young man yet? Number one gave him the queerest look of mischievous gravity, a look that seemed to say, Lily, of course, is our Lily, but if any outsider considered her wilfulness from the point of view of real common sense, he would be flabbergasted. Lily hasn't no young man, Abel Twig replied. Lily thinks she's aspired, in her tender heart, higher than the state of life to which it was pleased God to call her. Louis thinks she be angling for Mr. Barter. The old man leaned back in his chair and surveyed Sam with quizzical gravity. What they gals can say at one another to a world relative passes comprehension. What do you say to them, Mr. Twig? I listens. I chucks 'em under chin. I tell 'em how pretty their ribbings be. I waggles my head. Sam could hear the great pot boiling on the kitchen stove and the kettle lid rising and falling besides it. Well, Mr. Twig, he said, we better be getting to business. If I thought that you could hold yourself in between your bedroom and the end of the garden, I'd say, but I don't believe you could. Which being so, I fancy it would be wise to use your chamber pot. Poor Uncle Abel was on his feet now, his knees knocking together, his face pale. When operation be over, he stammered, do it means that they be going to leave I alone with me burstin' backside? Sam hesitated. In his anticipation of the scene, he had visualized every detail of the giving of the enema. For once given, he had imagined himself saying goodbye. To learn that he had to wait upon the old man's subsequent discomfort, a process which might easily take half an hour, was a shock of some magnitude. But his soul, like a stern corporal, rose up tall and metallic and commanded his body to obey orders. "All right," he said aloud. "Don't you be afraid, Mr. Twig. I'll see you through to the bitter end." Having uttered these words, Sam picked up the cardboard box from the table and surveyed its contents. "I shall want some hot water and some soap," he said. I wonder how graphic they're going to get with this. The melting of the soap, the conveyance of the hot and cold water upstairs, took a few more minutes. But the wheels of time, as with people condemned to die, moved remorselessly on, and the moment arrived when Sam was following the old man upstairs to get the thing done. As he went up behind Abel Twig, he thought to himself, it would be a much easier thing if it wasn't for the piles. These piles, as he entered the bedroom and glanced at all his careful preparations, presented themselves to his mind as a shocking obstacle. Those people would probably hurt you much less in the hospital, his body weakly murmured. Poor old Abel, with his teeth chattering and his braces and shirt hanging loose, turned upon his man-nurse eyes of such wild terror, eyes so much like that of a bullock before a slaughterer, that Sam hurriedly apologized for mentioning the word hospital. But his cowardly body was still trying to escape. There was a double-edged treachery in the words he uttered now. "It's how you take the whole thing," he said, "that makes the difference." "Well, I don't know what to think, Mr. Twig. I can't be good to feel. Perhaps it might, after all, be better to get the doc." But at the mere suggestion of that unlucky word, Mr. Twig looked as if he would willingly let Sam cut off his leg. "Go ahead, sir," he said. "If I hollers, you must be patient with I. I be a dodderin' old man, nigh 80 years agold. I bain't be strong as I were once, and they pains do make I call out. They bloody piles be a worse tribulation than any girt zisty. Oh, me a humpy, me humpty. But I be fearful bad. Be tender of eye, mister. Be tender of eye. A man's backside be a turble squeamy piece." Please. P-L-E-A-C-E with a little umlaut over the E. Please. Oh, I bet this guy's looking at a grail, right? And now he's the Holy Grail, and now he's delivering an enema. That's life, huh? Sam was not, it must be confessed, a born nurse, but he was a born naturalist and an unfastidious countryman. As he struggled with his task, bending over the old gentleman's rear, the tension of his spirit brought back with a rush the miraculous power of the vision he had seen. Oh, we're going to go into this now. The two extremes of his experiences, the anus of an old man and the wavering shaft of an absolute, capital A, piercing his own earthly body, mingle and fuse together to his consciousness. Holy Sam felt, as he went on with his business, a strange second sight, an inkling, as if to some incredible secret, whereby the whole massed weight of the world's tormented flesh was laboring towards some release. Here we go. As he kept pinching that rubber tube, for which number one had been so scurvily cheated by the unworthy Mr. Stickles, there came over him a singular clairvoyance about the whole nature of the world. In the silence around him, unbroken save when the old man cried out his queer expletive, "Me Humpty! Me Humpty!" he seemed conscious of their two figures, cowering there beneath eternity. Towards him he felt directed, in magnetic waves, the influence of the sun, and the influence of the great mysterious ether beyond the sun. He felt as if they were surrounded, there in Backware Hut, by host upon host of conscious personalities, some greater, some less, than themselves. A sharp pang took him when, in this extremely extremity of clairvoyance, he realized that his living, tortured Christ was now changed to something else. But whatever Sam's priggishness may have been, it was mercilessly honest, and he said to himself, "If Christ be dead, I still have seen the Grail." The anguish he was compelled to give the old man because of the plials made the process a delicate and difficult one. Beads of perspiration stood out on Sam's forehead before it was over. When it was over, and as he had foreseen it took more than half an hour, poor number one was completely prostrate, pallid and groaning. When at last Sam helped him up from his seat of purgation, he lay helplessly on his bed. It was all Sam could do to persuade him to get under the bed clothes. "Fourscore years old I be, 80 years, come to Witchen," he groaned. "And I be a Wembley carcass, not fit for a gentleman to operate on. I be burden to king and country, terrible weak in me stomach, and terrible sore in me backside." Through the open window there came now a shrill shattering of sparrows. "Them birds be different nor us be," murmured Abel Twig. "Them birds can scatter even as them do fly, and all be sweet as clover." In his weakness and helplessness, and in the physical relief he was then experiencing, 2 or 3 big tears rolled down his cheeks. In some mysterious way, the idea of the droppings of sparrows being so clean a thing filled number one just then with a melting tenderness. "I'll carry this away," said Sam, "and then I'll bring you up a glass of something hot. I suppose you're not quite equal to your pipe yet?" "Oh, you prig! Oh, you asinine prig!" Nell's husband would have roared at this point. "Equal to it? No, not quite equal to it yet. Not quite equal, but presently, perhaps." "I be all right without un for a bit, mister," replied the old man. "I be thinking of me chicks and me old cow, and how glad I'll be to see all they again after me operation." Sam said no more, but taking up the chamber pot, he opened the door and carried it downstairs. Stepping gingerly along the stone slabs across the little garden, he emptied the thing in the privy, and carrying it back to the house, rinsed it out at number one's outdoor tap. Then he went into the kitchen and surveyed the polished saucepan wherein the old man had prepared his Sunday stew. It appeared to him that the contents of this capacious receptacle, judging by the steam which emerged from under its lid, was cooked enough to provide at least a fairly savory soup. So he took it off the fire, and finding a strainer among Uncle Abel's utensils, he filled a small bowl with the onion-smelling liquid and carried it upstairs. He found number one nearly asleep, and instead of being pleased at the sight of this refreshment, the old gentleman seemed vexed with him for meddling with his culinary arrangements. "Do you want me to pour this back again, then?" said Sam. Abel Twig nodded faintly and closed his eyes. "Me pipe and me baccy be best for I," he murmured. Sam once more assumed this tone that Zoyland would have howled with contempt to hear. "A man likes his own tobacco," he says, "or I'd offer you a pipe of my father's. This is what he smokes." And he displayed before the eyes of the somnolent invalid a tobacco pouch which he had been keeping in his pocket since they left the vicarage. "I be minded to have a wink of sleep," was Abel Twig's sole comment upon this proceeding. Nope, that's not my cool. That's not my receipt. There's my bookmark. All right, well, that's it for today. We got through the enema. Now we can move forward with our lines. Till next time, cheers.